Hey everyone. So today we have a special guest. Her name is Alyson Lyon, and she is from Bright Light. And actually, right now, just take a note of it, brightlight.love. And she is a Reiki practitioner, teacher, as well as a yoga teacher from Chicago. So, Alyson, before we get started today, I just want to tell you I'm so thankful to have you here, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Yolanda. This is amazing. I found your podcast and I love it. And I just decided to reach out to you and see if I could be a guest. And I was like so excited. So thank you for having me.
Oh, honey, absolutely. And that's what, this community is about, like all of us connecting and learning from each other. So again, so glad you're here. And I really think this is going to be a conversation that supports so many people that people can really resonate with, because Alyson, we spoke before this and she talked about the path out of pain, which I thought was amazing, but also the choices that we have in healing, which again, I think is a powerful message, because a lot of times we feel like life is happening to us. So
Yeah.
before we come into the choices that you've made along the way, can you let us know how you even got started with Reiki and yoga?
Oh, geez. So, I mean, my journey started, I think, as an adult. I mean, I went to college for theater. I thought I was going to be an actor. And, my whole life was really involved in the arts and loved visual art, loved dance, loved music, and, really resonated with theater, because theater really brought a lot of it all together. And, I graduated with the BFA in theater studies from DePaul, and figured, okay, this is my life. And I came from a very conservative background, where, my dad did the same thing his whole life. And it was sort of like you pick one thing and you do that. And that was very much my thinking.
Right.
And that just wasn't how it worked out at all. And I got to a pretty interesting level with my acting, where, I was doing a lot of comedy, and just always had this love for comedy and a knack for it. And ended up in Los Angeles and was in LA for a couple years, in my mid-20s. And I tell you, Yolanda, I could not wait to get out of Chicago. Like, I was like, just so happy to get out. And I felt like I was embarking on something really big,
right.
This great adventure. And LA was really very challenging, especially at that age, I think. Yeah.
I was thinking like, wow, you survived LA. That's great.
Oh, you're not kidding. And it was at that level where it's like, I didn't know much about health and well-being. I went to Western doctors anytime something came up. And that period of my life was so stressful that I was having like sinus infections, and ended up with 3 weeks of pneumonia, and was just like run down a lot and very stressed. And it was really after the bout of pneumonia that I was like, I got to really consider what I'm doing here, and if this is sustainable. And in the same breath, like, things were going pretty well career-wise. Like, I was booking parts and moving up slowly and surely. But I just felt like, it just didn't feel right. I felt like it was, I didn't know if it was going to take me down, for good. Like, was I messing with a force that was not supporting fully? Like, what was I knew I was a little out of my league. You know what I mean?
I have to ask you, how hard was that for you? I mean, looking back now, hindsight, because I think just like what you said at the beginning, a lot of times when we decide what it is we think is our purpose, and we cling to it even when we feel like it's time to sidestep and not necessarily fully walk away, but sometimes we just have to sidestep and take care of ourselves in a different way before going back, right?
Yes.
So how was that for you to even have that come up as what you thought was your absolute now becoming like not, it didn't feel good.
Yeah, I had like come home to Chicago for a little bit, to see friends and see family and just sort of reconnect, and like I it just felt good to be around people who really loved me.
Mm-hmm.
And like LA, I was just sort of, in this group of performers. I wasn't like, I had some close friends, but it just felt like when I got back to Los Angeles after being in Chicago for an extended period, I was like, yeah, I just felt like after a point, it wasn't right. I couldn't fight the feeling. And um, there wasn't even like this feeling of failure, or I just was like, I have to get out of here.
Yeah.
It turned into a survival kind of thing of like, I ended up with a speaking role in a film and left LA like 2 weeks later.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't even like, oh, but my career is moving. It was like, no, just trust this feeling. You have to go. And
And that's a big deal because you get like your
yeah,
SAG affiliation after that type of thing, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So that's, yeah.
And I mean, and I didn't know what I had this inkling to become a teacher.
Mm.
So that was like in me. And even in LA, I was teaching a little bit of acting for kids, and and I'd always been teaching fine arts for kids since I was like 18 or something. So and that just started to brew, of like, I think I can go home and study to be a teacher, like go back to school, get a master's degree. And I had like the best teachers my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, just so many good teachers. And I was like, I could be part of that. Like I could join with that, be in that lineage,
Mm-hmm.
that of all the teachers I've had, that if I could step into that role, I think that'd be really um, rewarding and powerful and a good move for me. So I felt good. Like I felt like I had some pull, Um, and I think I shared this with you that, I came home from Los Angeles after this great adventure. Um, it was like May, and then I think it was July that my dad got diagnosed with cancer. So I would have come home anyway.
Right.
It was really interesting to look back on, like the timing. So
It's really interesting hearing you say that. I mean, the transition that you made, even from the acting to the wanting to teach, because, both of them are giving back in some way. Do you know what I mean? It seems like both have a different way of supporting people or like bringing joy or bringing light into people's lives. And it's interesting
sure.
now, even with the work that you're doing, it seems like you're always looking for some way to like connect with people and give some type of value, I guess you would say.
I think I mean, for me with yoga, that was so clear as part of the yogic path, is this path of transformation, of going from a place of duality, and arriving at a place of unity, and
Right.
really being able to be of service, um, because it's been a really rocky path, it
Right.
has not.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
interesting you say that too, because
yeah,
just like what we said at the beginning, the choices that you have in your healing, it sounds like even, I think we think a lot of times as our healing as just like healing tools or,
yeah,
certain things. But I think even obviously these choices that you were making, these changes in your life were part
yes.
of your healing. But I have to ask you too, because you said you got back and then your dad was diagnosed with cancer. So was it around that same time that you started energy work and yoga? And was it because of the stress related
Yeah,
to this?
it was a really big shift for me. It was sort of like, I think leaving Los Angeles was leaving a part of my um, immaturity behind, of I wasn't taking the best care of myself. I hadn't really investigated what does it mean to be in balance, you know, um, and after my dad was diagnosed, and here he was 54 years old, you know, suddenly, one day he's totally healthy, and then the next day he gets this news. And I remember him saying that he had like an out of body experience when he found out he had cancer. Like, he could see, he was like not in his body. He looked down, and it was really just a really very hard time. Our family also wasn't very equipped to handle that kind of emotional, um, journey together. We weren't a very emotional family together. So the communication in our family was, it was, it was just really, it was a great challenge. And I don't know, I had this moment of clarity, where my dad was diagnosed, and then I'm sitting there, and I had a friend over at my house, and I was smoking. I was a chain smoker. And if you knew me between the ages of 13 and 28, you pictured me with a cigarette. That was like a huge part of my persona. I don't even know, because it's so, when I tell people now that I smoked, they're like, what? But yes. And so I had this moment of clarity with this friend. And he was like, man, this place is like smoked out. You smoked so many cigarettes in here tonight. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done. Like, I can't joke around anymore about this, about my health, about the way I treat myself. Like, I got to put my foot down. So I literally opened up the phone book and found this social worker who, I knew the address. I had no idea who this person was, but who did hypnosis for smoking. And I was like, I don't know, but I had met somebody maybe the week prior who had quit through hypnosis. And I was like, this has got to be it. And I had tried many times to quit smoking. And I had really had this moment of clarity where I could see I had some visibility in front of me. And it was like, I cannot support my dad in his illness while I'm being really self-destructive. So I was like, let me do this. And that was it. And I never smoked again. And it's, 15 years later. Is that right?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And
yeah.
so then after going through all of that, I mean, it's interesting that you had such a like jarring and shocking, news and transition coming up. But then even that you had that conscious awareness of, I have to take better care of me.
Yes.
So, and I want to ask you about that too, really quickly, because I didn't mention this. I did mention that you practice Reiki and yoga, but you also share on Instagram, like all of these, like really simple recipes, like very healthy. You're very healthy recipes and things for people to, just share some tips and ideas with people. So did that also come from that space of you changing the way that you feed yourself?
Absolutely. It was a huge shift. It was a huge, huge shift. And I mean, maybe even as I think about it now, I mean, I was in my late 20s, but, my dad was so important to me in my life. And the story of my dad, even, like, I didn't share this with you in our conversation, but my dad, when I say dad, he's actually my stepdad. And I met him when I was 3 years old. And my parents were divorced, when I was 3, and it was really traumatic. They were not on good terms. They were on horrible terms. And it was very unsettling. And so my stepdad, one night, my mom was showing our apartment because we were going to sublet our apartment. And he just showed up. He was this random stranger. And I fell in love with him, and I just jumped into his arms. And my brother, I have an older brother, we both were like jumping on him and playing with him. And literally 6 months later, he married my mom.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And he took care of me. He was my dad. He was one of my best friends, and like always just so dependable, just such a kind heart, good person, hardworking, incredible role model, And so that's, I mean, the weight of that, that there was a chance he wasn't going to be around. And it was like, oh, wow. I mean, he's the one, he drove me to Los Angeles. You know what I mean? Any dream I had, he was like, let's do it. Yes. Like, I believe in you, And so to think that he was not going to be around, it was like, well, I better learn how to do this, you know. Yeah, so yeah, healthy recipes, sure. Like
You're like tackling everything. I mean, like literally, it's like you cover mind, body, energy with the yoga, Reiki,
yes.
food, with all of it. So, and I do want to point out, and we're going to talk about a little later as well, is you do blend Reiki and yoga. And I know a lot of people
Yeah.
who listen to the podcast have an interest in that. So I do want to make sure to ask you about that in a minute. But so in all of this, in that space that you're in, all of this transition, the fear of coming up, the choice to
Yes.
take care of yourself and start to nurture your own health. When did you then, or how did Reiki and yoga come into play?
So yoga came first. Yoga, I had like been in a class with a friend at some point, you know, in my early 20s, and it really eluded me. It was sort of like, oh, this is kind of like a dance class, but not really. Like, I'm a little bored. And I was like, I didn't really, yeah, I just wasn't really ready to get into yoga. So it was around that point, you know, like I said, I was in my late 20s, and I was at the gym and I stumbled into a forest yoga class. And it was so hard. It was so physically challenging. But the breath, using the breath, suddenly that was like a revelation. And, you know, I had quit smoking, and I was like keying into the fact that I had, suddenly I had lung capacity, and you know, just all the yeah, the breath cues, and I felt amazing after, even though it was so hard. I just knew something was there, and so started practicing, and have been practicing really since then. It was like '04.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about the breath. That is what also drew me into doing yoga teacher training as well. So
Yeah.
around this time, though, were you still teaching at this time?
No, so I did this degree that took me, you know, I finished in '07. I did a master's in education, secondary education, and I'm certified to be an English and theater teacher. And the way that worked, so super challenging profession. My gosh, if there's any teachers, like classroom teachers listening, I thank you so much for what you do. It is so challenging, and you're playing so many roles, and I knew that was really going to take everything I had to do. So I didn't feel fully ready to step in as a classroom teacher.
Yeah.
So what I did after I finished my degree, I ran like a theater program for girls, for middle school girls, out of this theater in Chicago. And so that was a nice way to merge my interests.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I played in a couple bands. I played music, and I just sort of, you know, because my dad passed right after I finished my master's, and I just was sort of like spun out a bit, and um, wasn't sure what was pulling me and what was not. So I did not, you know, step into a classroom at that point. I was like, let me just.
But it's interesting what you ended up doing, because again, it's kind of like, it's interesting that you had that full experience in LA, came home, started to go a totally different direction, but really kind of went back to that passion of theater and acting, just in a different way. And yeah, I think that's a cool thing too, because again, sometimes when we let go of the control and what we think everything is supposed to look like, we actually have some pretty amazing experiences that we could have never thought of in our head, right?
It's so true.
Yeah.
I think that's something that, like, I want to encourage, if anyone's listening, and, you know, just to encourage people, don't be afraid to change. Like, if something, if you feel pulled, you know, or you feel like you've gotten the message of where you are, and you're ready to take another call, like, just don't, you trust it, you know. It always works out. There's always, if it doesn't work out, it's not done.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, it's not always comfortable. And again, not always the way we think it's supposed to be, But yeah, when we allow ourselves to follow, like I call it following the breadcrumbs, but following just that pull or whatever it is that stirs in you,
Yes.
who knows why, and like really what will come of it.
It's so true. And also, I mean, there's something to be said for going slowly into new things, but just taking a few steps towards it. And I think with like yoga, it was like that. And with Reiki, it was like that. I mean, I did my, I did my Reiki 1 with a woman who used to host a Reiki restorative workshop monthly at this yoga studio, which is where I now do a lot of my services. And I went to this Reiki restorative where it's restorative yoga, and then somebody comes by and does Reiki throughout the whole thing, and it just felt so amazing. And I went to that for like a year on a monthly basis, and then went to like an intro to Reiki class. But then it was another year until I did my Reiki 1.
Oh, yeah.
So I really went really slowly into this path of Reiki, and then there were 2 years in between my Reiki 1 and 2, 2 years in between my Reiki 2 and my master teacher. So, lots of time to really
I'm glad you say that, so people know that they can do it in their way. Like I always say, that's a very important thing, that your practice and your path will be unique to you. And just because some people may do like it all in a weekend, or some people go very quickly through the process, like you can absolutely do it in your way.
Sure.
Good to know. So I have a question about the restorative yoga with the Reiki, because again, there are some people who are curious about like how do they, yes. So do they have multiple people doing Reiki, or how does that work?
So in that incarnation of the Reiki restorative, there was, there were a couple people who would come by and do Reiki, and they were, Reiki students. So it was really cool. They would have like 2 or 3 people that would come by and do Reiki. But I now do the Reiki restorative with a friend who leads the restorative yoga part, and then I'm the only one doing Reiki. So I go to each person as they're in these, laying postures. I just kind of circulate throughout the 90 minutes.
Nice.
Yeah.
And there was another type too, because I know you also have themed yoga classes, which was really cool. So could you tell us about that?
Yeah. Let me just go back real quick, Yolanda, because when I do the Reiki restorative, there's like what I call like an added bonus, which, which is like I do session notes. So that's one thing that I work with as a Reiki practitioner. When I'm working with somebody one-on-one, I work with the chakras. So I'll have a conversation with somebody for our first session about which chakra they want me to quote unquote report on. And I will listen for images and phrases, and I can always relay who is an energetic support to the person in that area, and that person might be past or living. So I that's part of my service as a Reiki practitioner, is I take notes as I go, and then at the end I'll leave like 10-15 minutes to go over the notes with the client and answer questions.
That's really cool. So you do that even in like personal one-on-one Reiki sessions with people?
Yeah, I do. And oftentimes a lot of times the stuff that comes up, some of it is it would be categorized as like clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant. I'm able to see sometimes, images of something that's going to happen, but or something that's current. So it's interesting.
So did your intuition, was it always very strong? You're always very intuitive, or was it something that developed as you went through like your Reiki, your yoga, and all of these different practices?
It definitely developed. I was, as you know, like I was always into the arts. I always loved anything that involved all my senses, anything hands-on, but especially, creativity, because it is so intuitive and there's so much in the process, that you have to trust. But I don't, I didn't have much of an understanding of it until really the last couple of years
Yeah.
of how it can benefit other people and how I can use it in my healing. So,
I
yeah.
have to ask you this too, since you say that, because it is interesting, these different layers about ourselves that start to reveal themselves
Yeah.
to us, like as we go through these, journeys of, because it's ongoing, right? Has there been anything else that stands out to you that you're like, wow, it's been interesting learning this about myself? Or
Yes. So one thing, um, when I was a kid, like I was put in swimming lessons,
Mhm.
and like that's cool, swimming's great, but like I'm for my physical body type, I don't have like the length that that is really advantageous to a swimmer.
Mhm.
Um, I always liked the water, I enjoyed swimming, but I really have like more of a gymnast type physique, and I liked gymnastics. I liked diving. I liked like flipping around. Um, but I hung in there with swimming, and it was all right. I never really complained much about it. I was okay. Um, but looking back on it, it's all about the breath.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's crazy. Like that I ended up in that, and and now, I've just started this Ashtanga yoga practice, which is a very,
Yes.
very physical yoga. And I'm like, now I can do the gymnastics, now I can like learn whatever I wished I had learned at, 10, 11 or whatever.
Like
Um,
get it like another step, but just with a bigger gap in between.
yeah, that's all here. That's
Right.
like the beautiful thing is like all the opportunities are still here. Um, there's that funny quote, like, it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
Oh, I never heard that. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's good. It's just, and that's a huge part of healing too, is like, letting go, just letting go of story, letting go of, um, healing wounds, and stepping in that like, okay, what I didn't get then, I can get now, and no opportunity is lost, and
Right.
yeah, carpe diem.
Yes. Seize it every single day, right? And one of
Yes.
the things that I also just remembered I wanted to ask you about as well, and we'll get back to the themed yoga.
Yeah,
But one thing is very interesting. I also saw that you do, and I think this is great too for people, help people think outside the box, right? Because again, a lot of times we think we can only do things in a very narrow framework. But
sure.
it's really interesting that you have given talks. Like I saw you recently went to give a talk like at a health food store.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty cool. So could you tell a little bit about what was the topic?
So the topic was about yoga and Reiki and my healing journey, and how these modalities have helped me to find balance. Um, and it was, yeah, it was so fun, and it was one of those things. Like I always go to that health food store. It's around the corner from my house, and I just asked the owner one day, like, do you ever have people come talk? And he's like, yeah, we do. Like we have like small groups come and meet up, and I was like, okay, would you be willing to have me? And he's like, sure. So it was just one of those things of just like the idea came to me and I asked, and I haven't done anything like that where I, you know just set up shop and said I was going to give a talk. Like
Yeah.
that was it took some bravery, but
Yeah, I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, I couldn't even imagine, but I saw that and I was like, gosh, that's so cool because it's so different. I've never heard anyone do that. But another really cool thing I saw you did too was um, offer, I think it was Reiki or chair yoga
yes.
for people in a corporate environment.
Yes. So that's one of my offerings this year as a yoga teacher is corporate yoga. And I have gone to this shared workspace in Chicago called WeWork, and I did like a chair yoga and meditation class. And basically, it's just like some simple stretches, and then some breathing and a guided meditation. And people loved it. It was a really nice way to break up the workday, and then um, de-stress and reset, and yeah. So so I'm offering that. And then I'm going to be back at WeWork doing an hour-long chair yoga, meditation, and Reiki. So it's like doing a group Reiki. And we'll see, I mean,
I love it though. I think that's just really, really cool that you're doing things that are, not a lot of people are doing. And again, I think that will inspire people to think outside the box and know that these tools can be shared in so many different ways.
Yes, especially like the corporate environment. I mean, with teaching, I ended up stepping into a classroom 2 years ago. So I ended up through a series of crazy events. I ended up as a makeup artist for about 6 years, and loved it. It was so fun, and it was such a nice way to keep up with all my creative practices and with storytelling and solo performance and all this kind of stuff. And so through makeup, I ended up doing this principal's makeup, and she was like, and I was thinking about, when do I step into a classroom? When do I use this education I have? And when am I ready? Am I ever going to do this? And then I met this woman, and it was really like this catalyst. And it was crazy. It was like one day I was doing blush on somebody on a Friday, and then on Monday I stepped in as this long-term sub for a 10th grade world literature class.
Wow.
And I hadn't taught in 10 years. And like, thankfully I am a decent actor, So I was like, all right, guys, here's the deal, like, all right, take out your binder.
That is so funny.
Yeah,
but again, I mean, it seems like so cool about your path is that everything kind of, connects to each other, has supported each other. And again, how you will sidestep, but something will come back around again.
Yeah.
And it seems like as you go through like these different phases or cycle of your own personal healing process, things resurface. And then I like it because a lot of people also have a fear of letting something go or giving up or giving in and that type of thing.
Never say die, never give up. And I mean, you may have to step aside for a bit or follow another path, but it may come back, so staying open, I think, is essential. And I think getting out of the way of, some limiting beliefs. I could have held the belief that oh, I hadn't taught in 10 years. Nobody's going to hire me.
Right.
Who am I to decide that now I'm going to be a teacher? What was I doing the last 10 years? I mean, the voice was there, but I was like, I think, I met somebody who had so much, who was so encouraging that it was like, oh, okay. I have momentum again for this. And, but so this idea of offering some corporate offerings, it's like, I mean, teaching in a classroom is not the same as a corporate job, but it was extremely stressful. 2 years in the Chicago public schools. And, I had an incredible time, an incredible experience on all levels, but, really witnessed people who had to work very hard. And, my fellow teachers, my colleagues and staff and everybody it was a very stressful environment. And to think what practices could be in place for an environment like this to alleviate some of the stress. That got me thinking now as I'm, full-time with Bright Light, it's like, well, what can I offer people who are, in stressful jobs and who don't have balance built into their day-to-day,
Again, that's such a beautiful offering. And so now I have to make sure to ask you about these themed yoga classes.
Yes.
I remember you even mentioned something about some music.
So I mean, music is a huge area of interest for me.
Classic, soulful.
Yes. So right now, I like to theme my classes. I mean, that speaks to my background as a teacher, as a classroom teacher. I do units of study. And I think the benefit of that is that there's, for my students, they actually can delve into a subject, related to yoga and get some intellectual stimulation in addition to, doing a physical asana practice. And so right now we're doing the 8 limbs of yoga, and that's like, this is ancient stuff. This is from the Yoga Sutras, which is like 5,000 years old. And it outlines, this path of transformation. And each week we do a different limb. And I kind of go over, I take like 5 minutes in the beginning to just debrief everybody on what it is. And everybody has a syllabus too, which is hilarious because
with the yoga class, this is the best.
Yeah.
Best yoga class.
And I'm always cracking jokes like, there's a test coming, but like, I'm like, but don't worry, it's open book and you can cheat off each other and everyone gets A's. So people can like look up things if they want to gain more knowledge, or,
right.
And each week with the limbs, I have a different classic soul singer. So the idea there is like, for me, I'm just a huge soul fan. And it's also like this idea that the majority of the soul singers that I have paired up with the 8 limbs of yoga all have incredible stories of transformation, of going from really hard circumstances to delivering something of such beauty and such truth, for all of us, and it's just powerful.
I was going to say, that sounds like an emotional and powerful class.
I hope so. I put a lot into it because I know what these modalities have done for me, yoga and music. And I love just bringing it together. And there's nothing better than somebody saying at the end of class, like, that was exactly what I needed, or thank you so much, I feel so good. And it's like, oh, good. Awesome.
So before we move to something else I want to ask you about, can you tell people if they're in the Chicago area, where can they come and experience these classes?
So I do private yoga. I'm now offering yoga plus Reiki. So you can come for like a private yoga and Reiki session, or private yoga. And all the times are on my Calendly link. It's calendly.com/brightlight.
Okay.
And then I teach also at Yoga Now, which is on LaSalle in Chicago. And you can go to yoganowchicago.com to find out my classes. I always teach Wednesday night, 7:30 to 8:45. That's yoga flow plus Reiki. So I do like a short flow and then an extended shavasana with Reiki. And then I teach a Saturday and a Sunday class that are vinyasa classes.
Very, very cool. So your Reiki class, that's what I wanted to ask you about. So you do have a Reiki class, a Reiki level 1 coming up in March.
Yes.
And could you tell us a little bit about that? Are you excited?
I am excited. I'm really excited. This is just feels big, I don't know. This is my first Reiki 1. So, it feels like I have a lot to share. I need to, really pare down some of my teaching. But I'm doing like an intro to Reiki class first. Mm-hmm. So that's nice.
That's what I would like you to share with people too, because a lot of people wonder how to introduce Reiki to their immediate community. So what do your intro to Reiki classes look like? And do you advertise like at the yoga studio, or how do you do that?
So I'm doing my intro to Reiki through Yoga Now. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because that's where all my Reiki teachers have come from. That's where I went to intro to Reiki. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's really a home base, for Reiki. And so the intro class is, background on Reiki. What are the various levels? What is it? And then questions, and then like a group Reiki demo.
Right.
And it's an hour-long class. And I think it's good for people who are interested in maybe getting Reiki sessions, but wanted to know a little more. And then also I think it's good for people who are interested in like a level 1 attunement, but they just want a little background.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that makes complete sense. So that's the same. If someone, again, anyone listening, if they want to take your Reiki level 1, and that's in the same area of Chicago as well.
Yeah, the Reiki level 1 is right now being offered at Yoga Now.
Okay.
So you can go to yoganowchicago.com/events. Yeah.
Yeah. But where can we learn about all of your work that you do?
Everything is on brightlight.love. So all of this is on brightlight.love.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I got a .love. It's literally
Yeah, I love that.
.love. I don't know. I love the .love too, but yeah, so everything's on there. So no worries.
I have to ask you this too before we go, because your story is very interesting. And again, I love how you allowed yourself to change, and you allowed yourself to just kind of, go, and not necessarily knowing how things were going to unfold, but literally how, I mean, you seem to have had such beautiful experiences, and again, circled back many times to
Yes.
your different passions in beautiful ways. Do you have any recommendations for people, two sets of people? One, for people who are just starting out in their Reiki practice. And, a lot of people, when they begin, they do start to feel that tug of war between like the old self and the self they're starting to discover.
Sure.
Do you have any recommendations for people around that? How did you get through that? And was that even hard for you?
I think I think we're always becoming more of ourselves, I think that's my experience,
You've always been paying attention.
Yeah, that there's an evolution at hand,
Yes.
I think of it as an ascension process.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can start, I think, seeing that way, it's a perception that yes, there's going to be obstacles, and there's going to be blocks in the road, and there's going to be multiple opinions coming at you at once. But if you know that every step is moving you up, then I think you start to develop a trust.
Yeah.
And I'm such a fan of journaling. I know some people don't like to write,
Yeah.
but I'm a big fan of journaling because you're really in conversation with yourself, and that's been invaluable. I'm a big fan of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
That program has just shifted my life multiple times.
Yes.
And it's just a lot of awareness work. So I think,
and great journal prompts and exercises for people who feel like they don't know how to journal.
Yes. But I think meditation has been essential to my process. I at one point I did a course at the Zen Buddhist temple in Chicago, and was there a lot practicing meditation, and that's been really key. You get to see really, the workings of the mind, and the way we can get pulled into the monkey mind, and it's not who we are. It's just sort of a function of the brain, so.
Well, I have to ask for the other people as well listening, that because you, again, are very inspiring, that you have put yourself out there and sharing in so many different ways, like from, sharing at the Whole Foods place or the health food place, and then sharing in the corporate environment, and sharing, doing this themed and blend Reiki and yoga and all of these different things. I mean, allowing yourself to be really creative. So do you have any recommendations around that for people who are maybe a little nervous? I mean, did you ask for help, or was it just your passion that drove you to just go for it?
I mean, there's teachers all around me, like I have a lot of people around me who are, who I just look to as examples. So all kinds of teachers, you know. That's like I said, like I think that was part of my interest in becoming a teacher, was like I always had these great teachers.
Right.
So I feel very lucky. I've always you know, I've had great teachers along the whole way. So um yeah, and just even just looking at people and you like what they do, and just sort of asking yourself like, well, what do I like about it, and what could I do even in a small way, just to get aligned with that. um yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but
No, it does. And a lot of what you said, it reminds me of too the importance of community. And it
yes.
kind of screams back to what you shared towards the beginning of, you know, after going to LA and pursuing your dream of an aspect of it, and then having that longing for, you know, like the deeper connection and love and community. And I think that in of itself supports so many of us more than we may recognize. And oftentimes it's just that, like allowing ourselves to connect with people that may have
Yeah.
more interest and can support us.
You know, one thing I think and this is an ongoing process, and part of my healing is like letting go of shame.
Yeah.
You know, that like, you know, I didn't make the best choices at various points in my life because I didn't know better. And I think that's like where some healing can come in too, is like forgiving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That if you had the knowledge and you really understood, you would not have made those choices, but you did make those choices. And now you can find your, you know, find a higher self to,
Yeah.
you
You
know,
may have
connect
learned
with.
some invaluable lessons through those choices. That's, you know, one of
Yes.
the things too, when people have a hard time getting past their past, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
look at what you learned from it and how it's contributed to who you are.
Yes. I mean, if you can keep learning, that's every experience. Like I said, everything is moving you up.
Yes.
So getting out of the fear of making a mistake or looking dumb or
Mm-hmm.
not knowing enough or whatever, you know, the saboteur in your ear is chatting, you know, and just, I think also letting go of ego and saying like, if this can help someone, if this can be of benefit to someone, I'm going to step in and do it. I'm going to get out of my way, you know, with my self-doubt and aim to be of service.
Oh, that's how I started the podcast. That exact thing. I was like, I need to get out of my way so I can share because this matters to me. But yeah, I didn't. I was terrified, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And
Gosh, so much juicy stuff you
it's
shared.
so good. And it's also like, it's also feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes.
Just, it's okay. It doesn't feel comfortable, but like, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you, you know, just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And
but I love the way you just said it. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm going to make
yes.
sure to put that in the show notes. So, anyone listening, if that kind of like clicked with you too, don't worry. I'm going to put it in the show notes so we can all remember that one.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
a really good one.
Thanks,
And you said
Yolanda.
so many things I've been writing down, like, oh, I got to make sure to put that in the notes so that we can all reference it later. So I do want to thank you so much, Alyson, for
Oh, thank
coming to
you.
share your work with us. And again, if you're in Chicago, absolutely check her out. Yoga, Reiki, you may find her in some interesting environments because you never know. But I really do. I love that you allow yourself to be so creative and like really do it your way.
Thank you,
That is
Yolanda.
beautiful. Yeah. So go to brightlight.love, LOVE, and I will put your website in the show description as well. Are there other ways that we can find you? What's your Instagram?
My Instagram is Bright Light Chicago.
Bright Light Chicago.
Bright
Okay.
Light Chicago. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, love. And obviously we'll keep in touch and, you know,
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on, Yolanda. You're an amazing, amazing host and such awesome questions and the best energy. And I thank you so much for what you do and for being brave and doing a podcast and being committed. And that's just a quick side note, you know, stay consistent and trust the process.
yep.
That's what I can tell you guys. If anyone's listening and they're like, what is the takeaway? Stay consistent, trust the process. It's all unfolding exactly as it should.
Beautiful. And it's so true.
Yeah.
So Thank you again, honey. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here. Be sure to visit Alyson's website, and we will talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Yolanda.
Thank you, love.